Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast on the Lions of Liberty Podcast Network. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by a recurring guest. He's been on before. He is a New Hampshire supremacist, a New Hampshire libertarian leader, and one of my favorites to follow on X for sure, Mr. Jeremy Kauffman. For those of you who just might have audio and you don't have the video, Jeremy and I seem to be a part of the same tribe. We have long hair, we got beards, we got some salt and pepper happening. I think we're living we're living pretty good lives. It looks like.
Yeah, this is part of my my hair is part of my midlife crisis, and part of I have to, as I get more and more far right, I have to find a way to stay true to my hippie ethos, and so right now it's embodied by the hair.
I'm waiting. Yeah, it's not to. It won't be too long until you start getting dreadlocks, right? Is that the next move?
Oh yeah. I feel a Rastafarian arc incoming. I think that's definitely on the horizon for me.
Well, something that I've noticed, and I've talked about this before on my podcast, is like everybody who hates me online keeps pointing out that I'm going bald.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, I never realized that I had like a receding hairline or anything like that. And I never had like an issue with it. And then I started looking, I'm like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to be 44. Like, fuck it, whatever. I'm going bald. And then I look at pictures of myself from like 10 years ago and I'm like, it's the same hairline. Like I've had this the whole time,
So you're holding the line. That's a good sign. Yeah.
Holding the hairline.
Yeah. It was always there. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mentioned that, you're one of my favorite people to follow on X. And then one day you were gone. And I was like, where is he? What happened? You took a hiatus, a sabbatical or something from at least that platform. Was that intentional? What was behind that?
Yeah, all right. So this is a little bit embarrassing, but I'm a very honest person, and I've just been I've been the last like year or so I've been kind of lazy, and probably not on like an absolute spectrum of laziness, but like compared to my past performance, I've been kind of lazy. And so I was like, well, maybe if I stop posting on X, I'll get less lazy.
Mm.
And it didn't work. It didn't work. I just miss, I just miss X. And so I've been back because I've made so many interesting relationships and connections there. Like this idea that social media is not real life is completely false, right? I've met so many people in real life because we interacted on the internet before that. So it was a good experiment to see what my life was like if I didn't post on X for 6 weeks, but I don't think it was successful.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, I wonder. I have like the type of brain where I don't have ADHD or anything like that. But I I'm all over the place in that I have like so many different kind of projects happening that I like bouncing, from this to that, this and that. And X is just a perfect platform because like just today when we're recording this, I just found out that Scott Adams passed away.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and
That one hit me hard,
yeah, yeah,
actually.
and I want to talk to you about that. But like that being said, like I find out Scott Adams, passes away, and then right below that is like I don't know, like some chick twerking during a riot, and it's sort of like if there's like a supercomputer kind of putting together a brain, it's like, well, that's kind of my brain. It's sort of like you have these really touching, moving moments that all about life affirming, etc. And then you have just some like wacky shit there too, and so I think in a way, X has just become even more perfect for me in the way that I operate.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to admit that I love it. You can have all these interesting interactions. You can make an interesting point or a clever joke, and millions of people see it. It's a very meritocratic platform.
Mhm.
Actually, like anyone can succeed if they're able to present their ideas the right way or present the right piece of media, and I like that about it a lot.
Yeah, and I like seeing too, people who have been, posting for a while that, I discovered them when they were, kind of small accounts, and then you see them get boosted by like Elon Musk. And it's like, this is awesome. Like, I'm so happy that my friend Wilford Riley, who he's had a major account, a big account for a while, but he's been doing his academic stuff and his writing and his books and all this for a while. And now to see him get boosted by like Elon Musk, I'm like, yeah, great. More people are going to find out about my friend and everything that he talks about. This is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like, I mean, I think what Elon has done with X is incredible. I think if you're, for free speech, for this sort of free exchange of ideas and et cetera, like there's no better place to be, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, and I also credit X with, to the point that you make about, people say that it's not real life. X is the only place where I come into contact with people who share a completely different worldview than I do, you know?
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's a combative thing. If you have a hammer and sickle in your handle, we're probably not going to get along. But it's like, you're a reminder, you're out there. And I have to deal with the reality that there are more than you out there who believe exactly what you believe.
That that's also very true. I have a sort of beautiful bubble for myself here in New Hampshire where I've positively selected, for peer group, friends, people who I'm broadly aligned with. Part of why I'm kind of I'm considered a sort of like loud or abrasive, personality on social media, but that comes from a confidence that I have a network, a personal in real life network that shares my values. So, like, I'm not going to lose my job. Well, I don't have a job. I'm not going to lose. I'm not going to lose my.
We both look like guys who don't have a job.
I have things that make me money, but I'm not. I'm not working in the ways that I have in the past. But I have a sort of safety, a sort of comfort that comes from my relationships aren't going to be threatened by there being some aspect of myself that was discovered. I'm uncancelable
Mhm.
due to my sort of the construction of my social life that I've been able to build for myself here, and that gives me a certain confidence in how I conduct myself. Where if it was 10 years ago, well, I guess 15 years ago at this point, I had a much different social network. I had similar perspectives, but I had to bite my tongue due to the reality of the social situations that I was in. And I look, and I think you're very loud and proud. So I'm not trying to question you, but like it's got to be tough being a comic. Like I know how I know what that scene is like a little bit, and it's hard to hold probably the opinions that you do at times in some of your peer groups, and you've got to walk a line a little bit.
Well, there are definitely, I could easily get bogged down in, questioning like, oh, did I not, book a part because of, how loud I am on, online because of my, my beliefs there. Although it has been a while since I've like auditioned for something. But, something that's happened though is like, the more honest that I've been, the more open I've been, the more opportunities I've had, whether, I'm making them myself or I become sort of like a magnet where people are like, "Oh, I have this project that I don't think anybody would be interested in." Not because it's not a good project, just because the nature of, the politics, the ideology, or whatever. But I think maybe Lou would take a look at that. And that's something that's happened with me producing like sketch comedy over the years where I've, kind of fostered these relationships with really great writers and comedians, and they know like, hey, if they have an idea for a sketch, nobody else is going to want to touch it, but I'll work on it with them and, produce something that we're all proud of. But, I have to say though, the past couple of years, uh, there have been, quite a few times where I've been really excited about potential projects and then they just fall through, you know? And it's like, oh fuck, I'm back at at the start trying to figure out, what am I going to do to, take care of take care of my family. But I think I think I'm sort of at the point where uh my lot in life I'm making it and I'm doing with it what I can, and that if I don't get something, like if I don't book a writing gig or if I don't book like a live act, I I don't chalk it up to, "Oh, they must have checked me out on X." I chalk it up to, they just went a different way and whatever, well, let's stay positive because we have other projects and, down the road.
Totally. Yeah. No. And look, that's completely the right psychology, right? You don't want to develop that. This is something. Maybe I'm pivoting the conversation a little bit to my pet topics that are on my mind at the time. But this is something I've been involved in these like libertarian circles for a long time, and one of the things I've seen is like the different psychology of the people that manage to become libertarians, right? Because
Right.
you have very talented, people, curious people, smart people, highly able people, agentic people, and they are often attracted to libertarianism. And I think a lot of libertarians fit that profile that I just described, at least one of them. But then you also get people who are, and this was odd to me. You get people who are like psychologically bitter and they're angry and they're ornery and everything is the government's fault. Every reason that something is going wrong in their life, it's just the government's fault. And we might agree superficially on our political prescriptions, right? We might want similar political outcomes. So I'm not trying to say I see this latter category as like my enemy, but I find that if I hang out with them socially, or whatever, there's a difference, here.
Mhm.
And I definitely don't see you in that category in the slightest. But this has been part of my own evolution is understanding this, the psychological dispositions that may or may not lead someone to becoming a libertarian.
No, I think that's really, really important. I think, reading the stuff that you've put out, and then also, through my, lived experience as well. Uh, I, I think I posted this before where it's sort of like, libertarians have helped to make me less libertarian, you know, where, we're in this kind of we're in this funny situation where the idea, oftentimes when people talk about like, the marketplace of ideas and winning out in the marketplace of ideas. I find it really funny that a lot of the people who talk about that happen to work for like nonprofits. It's like, oh, we'll talk about winning out in the marketplace of ideas. Yeah, I guess you could tell yourself that when you have billionaire donors and millionaire donors who are funding all your shit that nobody reads. Um, but like this idea of, like, for example, people coming here from other countries, the idea that you're going to make all of them more libertarian because they touch the United States. Meanwhile, you can't even make most Americans libertarian who are already here. So it's just, I don't know if it's like, it's not necessarily black pilled or anything like that. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that you can convert people to libertarianism by just talking to them about the ideas or rationalizing with them. I just think there's a point where some people are just not going to go, and there's nothing you could do about it.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps as a means of getting people to reach more reasonable conclusion, but I'm basically on the exact opposite of that spectrum. That it's like nearly impossible to convince people to become a libertarian. Like, it's like to what the for most libertarians, for especially the like really like passionate ones, it didn't take that much. It wasn't necessarily one event, but like a little bit of exposure to the ideas, it sent them down, a rabbit hole or a little bit of repeated exposure, and all of a sudden they became libertarians. And those same books, those same creators, whatever it might be, it's clearly not a universal effect, right? Like most people are going to be able to read Rand or Friedman or Rothbard or Mises or whoever, and like it's not going to change their worldview at all. And there's something here that libertarians like really need to square their beliefs with, which is the stuff that worked on you doesn't work on other people. Like this
Right.
this hints at some sort of fundamental differences between us. And I want to achieve the most libertarian, society possible. It's part of why I live in New Hampshire. But I'm a realist first
Right.
and foremost. I'm a realist. I want to understand what's real, what's true. And it just simply appears to be true that many people are not libertarians, and there's not any experience that they could have that would make them libertarians.
Mhm. And I even find it, hearing, libertarians, discuss stuff, and I know it was probably like a couple years ago, I think you got into it with a number of people just over kind of like homeless encampments, especially in New Hampshire, right? And I think you had posted something, to the effect of, it's like, "Hey, if you give me and my, my boys or, our, compatriots, an afternoon, we will clean up this fucking park and get all these druggies out, and it'll be very easy." But yet, what's getting in the way is, not just the state, but also people on the libertarian side saying, "Well, no, they have a right to, be here. It's a commons and blah blah and blah blah blah." And I think that might have been around the time where I was like, "Oh wow, I think I'm very different than these people," because
Yeah, yeah.
because I'm like, "All right, get the snowplow on the fucking truck and plow these fuckers up, get them out of here. I want my kids to be able to go to the playground and play."
Yeah, this is one of those things where I don't it does, it makes me feel, very, very alien from some of these other libertarians who are like, all government-owned property is equivalently unowned and unhomesteaded, and therefore it's perfectly fine for, a homeless person or a junkie to occupy a, quote, "public park" and do whatever they want in it, and then that is, like, morally okay, and this is what I was it very much relates that the earlier comments I was making about that sort of what is the intrinsic psychology that attracts someone to libertarianism. And because there really are these people who have a sort of, in my opinion, a negative psychology. Negative is maybe not the most descriptive word. They're attracted to the idea of tearing things down,
Right.
and because libertarianism allows that. You're allowed to hate the state. You're allowed to say all these systems are terrible and they need to be destroyed. And I think a lot of these systems are terrible. So I share that aspect, but I want better systems. I want better things. And, so to me, the conclusion that I've reached, and I probably got this from Robert Nozick, which is that you want to evaluate the counterfactual of what the society you want to live in, would produce this more private property, this more voluntary society, which I want these things, but it's like, look, if there's a park 2 blocks from my house, you know, and we all paid, property taxes. The residents here pay property taxes to support that park. The counterfactual is that, we would pay a small amount of money to our private park agency, and that private park agency would ensure that bums are not in the park and that my family can go there and so on and so forth. And we're in this like anarcho tyranny type environment where I am taxed to pay for police to protect the bums. The bums do not pay taxes. The bums do not own property in the area, and they occupy the park, and I'm taxed to protect the bum. And it's like, this is so backwards. This is so screwed up. And, um, but there is this minority of libertarians who are like sympathetic to the bum, and it's very alien to me.
Yeah, and I've sort of noticed it too when it comes to, ideas about property, and especially, when you see, like, videos being passed around about, like, say, for example, police, beating up a guy who's resisting arrest or, et cetera. And, the call that goes out about, "This is the state is violence," et cetera, et cetera. It's like, "Okay, I get all that." But in my, libertarian world, right, where property rights are very respected, that guy probably gets it a lot worse from me and my private and whatever my security is than what that cop is doing to them. So it's sort of like, I don't know if enough kind of libertarians are ready for a world where it's like, no, no, you've been told to get off my fucking property. Now you need to get off my fucking property. I don't know if a lot of people are ready for that, or maybe I don't know, maybe I'm a kook. I don't know.
No, I mean, no, I think this is completely correct, and I think it's crazy to let the ideology be defined by these kinds of people, because to me the core ideas of libertarianism, that private property is paramount, free markets work, we own ourselves and interaction should be as voluntary as possible. These are really good ideas, and they resonate with me, very strongly today. And when I spend time on social media, like a third a third of the quote libertarians like see me as like an enemy, and I'm ruining libertarianism. And it's like, even if we have disagreements, like I can find by the way, like I think we'd have reasonable disagreements about, well, how does a nation manage citizenship, and what is the actual counterfactual of a libertarian order, and but these people seem to get so upset. They seem to find me like somehow I'm standing in the way
Yeah.
when I'm 95, when I, at least ostensibly policy wise, I would be closer to them than 98% of Americans. And so it's like, what's going on here? And part of the explanation for me is like, it is this they are psychologically bitter and envious people. I don't think they are literally communists, but they have a lot of the similar psychology that creates communism, and they were given an alternative explanation that wasn't communism, which was the state is the root of all evil, and we're allowed to tear down the state, and you're allowed to destroy things as long as it's state property, and these kinds of things. And I think like you can't build anything successful with these kinds of people, because these people will always be this way, and that in any society they would be negative and destructive and whatever, because this is unfortunately an aspect of human nature that exists within the wide spectrum of humanity.
And I consider myself fortunate in that I'm a dues paying member of the LP National. I pay for the New Jersey state as well, chapter. So I am a card carrying libertarian, a member of the Libertarian Party. And I think I'm fortunate in that what I do with the party, which is often performing, I'm doing comedy. So I'm able to kind of separate myself from a lot of like the deep, either, philosophical, you know, arguments or outright, fights, because I tend to get along with with everybody. And also I do a lot of stuff. I perform quite a bit with, conservatives too, so uh I guess it's saying I don't want that to change. I want to be able to continue to do, the comedy that I do, and I guess maybe this is me saying, Jeremy, you go fight. And I'm gonna be
Well,
back here. You go fight.
we have different, goals. Like, I'm trying. What I feel at this point is there's a specific archetype. Well, not like literally one, but there's a variety of archetypes that uh, would be sort of successful New Hampshire free staters, and I want to attract that energy here to the movement here in New Hampshire, and I don't care how many people I piss off. Like,
Mhm.
and I don't know if 19 people are bothered by me, but I get one, you know, potential person who I think could come here and be a big difference. That's a great trade for me. And so we face different incentives in our own, sort of personal life in terms of what we're, trying to accomplish.
I just realized that I live in a bubble when it comes to New Hampshire, because in my mind, because all of my interactions with people from New Hampshire are with you guys, whether it's Liberty Forum or Pork Fest and all that. So in my mind, New Hampshire is already libertarian, but when you look at the population and the data, it's not the case. Like you guys are still trying to get people to move there, still trying to fight, when it comes to, uh, legislation and that sort of thing. So I have to remind myself, like, oh, you guys are still fighting.
Oh, it's well, I mean, to me, and this is, I think, something we can lose track of. Like, look, I think New Hampshire is the greatest state in America, most libertarian state in America. It's 5 to 10% better policy wise than every other state. I think the best thing it has to offer is the sort of peer groups, the psychological and social freedom that comes from having this space where you can have these networks of people who share your values. But in terms of like what's achievable, we're you know it's early. It's early, right? Like, I still pay federal income tax,
Right.
I still pay, state taxes for all kinds of things. And I wouldn't mind if my state taxes were just going to, the roads and the police, but they're going to things far beyond that. And so, it's that the what we want to achieve is so far away from where we are. Now, I think we're actually on track to achieve this because I believe that people are continuing to sort themselves out ideologically and value-wise. People are, moving to or away from places um, based off of the political climates, the social climates, and so I think New Hampshire has sort of carved out a really great niche where it has this reputation that is going to make it succeed over time. But I think it's still going to take decades. I think it's going to take decades to achieve what I would really like us to achieve.
Yeah. I think the thing holding New Hampshire back, it's the weather. I think that's really the tough. Like the Northeast is just tough for a lot of people. Um, and being from New York, I know we have similar climates and stuff where you look over all the way to the west, you look at a state like California, and you're like, fuck, if there was any way to just I don't know, flip the poles, do some, sort of like, maybe you're working on it. Maybe you have some like
No, but
mad scientist
the
thing.
unfortunate truth is there's not a way.
Yeah,
Like the
yeah,
average IQ in California is like 10 points lower than New Hampshire. You go out there, services don't work. You know, I'm not a government defender, but it's like it's I moved from Philadelphia, which is
oh,
also a city with a lot of problems, and it was mind blowing for me moving from Philadelphia to New Hampshire. Because when I was in Philadelphia, there'd be a road project and there'd be like 6 people standing there not working for every one person doing everything. You see a road project in New Hampshire, it's like 2 people doing a job, they set up their own signs, there's no one that has the job to like wave people around this like nearly worthless job that you know it's remarkable. I go to the DMV here, and again, I'm not endorsing all this stuff,
right, right.
but, like, I go to the DMV here, and it's, like, functional. Like, I can call my city government, and, like, a woman answers the phone and, like, answers my questions. I'm like, "What just happened?" Like, this is nothing like what I have experienced living anywhere else, and it has to do with, the population and the types of people here, and, of course, we can still envision better things than, what's being done. I'm not trying to say that what New Hampshire's doing is perfect, but it's like it really is different when you have the population makeup that New Hampshire has.
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing. Like I can no longer do post office jokes. Because like the post office in my town, they work great. Like
Yeah, yeah.
they're always kind. They get the job done. I'm like, oh, okay. There's all my jokes from the 1980s. That I wouldn't be able to do
Yeah,
with I guess I look into to California, just talking about like huge shakeup. The billionaires wealth tax. Um,
exactly.
can you explain what the fuck is what was going on there? Whose idea was it to like to basically tell California like what I love is like California is basically saying like billionaires shouldn't exist and they should fund everything. So, so it's like what are you guys doing?
You know, I don't know all the details of the policy, so you should also jump in and correct my explanation if you know better, but basically they're trying to tax people based off of their net worth, uh, but that net worth includes basically any equity holdings in any company. And then the craziest part for me as a startup guy and a tech guy is they're also trying to the tax is going to be set off of the percent of your voting share. So it's not even the amount of stock that you have. So it's very common that tech founders, when you found a tech company, as you get funding, you're going to dilute your own equity. But founders who want to retain control, will construct share structures where the founder shares or certain class of shares has outsized voting rights. So like with Google, my understanding is that the Google founders, Sergey and Page, have um, I don't know what the multiple is, like 5 to 10x. Their shares have excessive voting rights. And so they're not even going to be taxed at their net worth. They're going to be taxed at the voting rights share of their, stock holdings. And it's like, you are driving the most talented people out of your state.
Yeah.
I think it's crazy that so many tech companies stay in California, although I can understand why, because the human capital that exists in San Francisco is genuinely incredible. Like, San Francisco does have a lot of very smart and talented people who live there. But it's like, this is your cash cow. This is the reason that your state can be so awful in so many other ways, is that there's this minority of tech companies who are generating immense wealth for your state, and you're subsisting off of them. And now you're passing a policy that's like going to drive them away. And so I think this is crazy. New Hampshire's going in the opposite direction. We've eliminated our capital gains tax, our tax on investment income. And, I would like the state to be very attractive to, wealthy people, which I imagine your listeners are all millionaires or billionaires, bro.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I put it out there. If there are any billionaires who need a place to crash, I have a guest room in New Jersey. But yeah, when you describe, sort of the formula on, how the state of California is going to determine, how much they take from you. It's like, do they even have, like, you talk about the human capital to do the math on that?
Well,
It's insane.
it all works backwards from bitterness and envy. Like, this is the thing that, like, this is the way of squaring this. It's like, why are they so stupid? Yep. It works backwards from bitterness and envy. They see the successful people and it makes them angry. It makes them bitter, and they want to punish success. That, like, literally is the motivation, to pull down the successful people to the level of, everyone else.
Yeah.
Like, Ayn Rand, I think, was unrealistic at times, but she gets her villains completely perfect.
Dude, you're not the first one to say that. I think I co-host a show now, a new podcast called Happy Hour Econ with Phil Magnus, and Phil pointed out, he's like, specifically about New York City. It's like, yeah, here we have like real world Ayn Rand villains. People who said that they were too cartoony to exist in real life, and boom, here they are. And I lived out in California for I think it was like close to 5 years, and was going back and forth, doing comedy for a long time. And, I loved it out there when I was out there. There was a lot of really great stuff. And now I'm looking at, you know, the billionaires who are leaving, and then you have show business that is leaving. And I'm like, what are you going to have there in California now? It's beautiful. I know there's going to be, I think there will still be, pockets of, well-run, successful, cities and towns and stuff. But man, I just don't know what the future looks like for them.
Yeah, I mean, so it's one of the things where, because there is this return to scale, or like sort of winning the market, where it's like, it really is true that San Francisco, if you were a bright, motivated founder or tech person, like, San Francisco is the place to be, and that creates, positive, um, externalities. Like, it's an agglomerator. It makes sense. If that's where everyone else is, that's where I should be. And you can, once you've sort of won that, they can carry around a ball and a chain that takes away 10% of what they do, or 20% of what they do. But eventually that breaks, and you can't do it forever. And eventually there will be, so I'm trying to fix my camera. Eventually there will be a new center, and then they're going to lose everything.
Yeah. You talk about your family, here and there, and, raising kids in New Hampshire. And I think you're like a tribe of four, is it?
Yeah, we have,
Four kids?
between 2 and 8.
Four between 2 and 8. And are you guys homeschooling?
We do. My kids are out at the farm today. I believe they are butchering a pig, is what their homeschool lesson today will be.
Okay, great. Because so I wasn't homeschooled. I went through the public school system in New York in the 80s and 90s, and then went to Catholic high school. And so I'm not that familiar with homeschooling, like, from a personal perspective, but I know a lot more people are doing it. And there are a lot of people who shit on homeschooling, who obviously don't know anybody in homeschooling and how it's done. And I think you just sort of like highlighted, like, it's not exactly what people think it is when, I think a lot of people think like, oh, all the kids are in your living room and mom and dad are responsible for teaching them every single thing, from, ABCs all the way to, calculus, when they're in kindergarten. But yeah, like what does homeschooling look like for you guys?
Yeah, so that's a great comment, and I agree with you. I think, well, I kind of dislike the term homeschooling, but I
Yeah,
haven't found a better one. I told Corey DeAngelis he needs to get on this, but I don't think he's solved that for me yet. But because homeschooling is basically the term that means non-traditional schooling
right.
or non government schooling, and that means that it can mean any a really wide variety of things. For some families, it probably is what you said, where like the parents literally are teaching them everything. In our case, it means a sort of assembled set of classes, of some stuff happening within the home, but a lot of stuff happening outside the home. And so, for our family, like they actually still do get they go to some structured math classes with paid educators in a somewhat standard environment because I believe learning math is very important. They go to a farm once a week where they learn about farming, and they also tend to get some shooting practice in when they're at the farm. They have rotating homeschool co-op classes where there's a curriculum that could be it's usually 6 to 8 weeks at a time, and that could be gardening, that could be aspects of science. We do stuff within the home. There's all of this incredible ed tech that's being developed, and so we use some of this stuff, particularly for our in-home. I am I was originally their math teacher because I am a math guy, and I was just like absolutely obliterated by the AI math tutor. Like my kids got the AI math tutor, and they're like, "Dad, we like the AI math tutor more than you." And I was replaced by a machine, and it was a little bit of an ego blow, but it's a good curriculum, and the kids like my kids like their current AI math system so much that they will like wake up and say, "Can I do math?"
Oh my
And it's
god,
because it's
amazing.
this gamified math curriculum.
Is it synthesis?
Yeah,
Is that
we use
okay?
synthesis. Yeah,
Yeah, that
but
yeah.
there's other products out there that I'm sure also. I mean, that I'm sure are very good. And so that's a lot of what we do. My kids do formal gymnastics lessons. They do jujitsu lessons, um, and so there's all these classes that we've put together, for ourselves. Some of it's in the home, some of it is outside of the home with formal educators, and some of it is co-op style, where it's a group of parents and a parent who's an expert in subject matter A, B or C, leads that sort of cycle of the co-op.
Mhm. It makes so from a a psychological standpoint, as we were talking before, it makes so much sense because it's like you're more than willing to take chances on stuff. Where my wife and I are hesitant about doing stuff like that. Uh, I think in part because our sons when our sons are outside the house, dude, they play, they get along with everybody, they're the kindest kids, they, eh eh they do great. The second they walk into over that threshold, they are they are out of it, you know? So it would in a way, I'm like, if we were to try to do, like, a homeschool thing, we'd have to, like, rent something, like, and even, like,
Yeah,
take them to it because them being in the home, I think, is already, like, kind of a trigger for them to just not behave
yeah.
in a way that will work, you know?
Well, again, a lot of it is outside the home, and we have in New Hampshire, there's like these various, basically every major or even minor city area has these various community centers. There's like 5 or 6 libertarian community centers in a relatively small state with a population of 1.5 million. So there's never one that's too far away from you. And yeah, the classes will often take place in these areas, or there's now effectively libertarian schools or libertarian leaning schools here. And so there's all this, and I am not, I went to a traditional public school in a middle to upper middle class area. I actually didn't hate it. I did fairly well in school, and I'm not opposed to my kids even go. Like I could see my kids. We haven't made a decision on this. It's very premature, but I could see sending them to a charter school at age 11 or 12 or, as they get older. I think particularly at the younger ages, um, school is not providing that much benefit for how much time it's taking up. Like
Mhm.
you can get your kids through all of elementary school math in like half an hour a day in like a year or two. Your kids can learn to read and can learn all of these things in sort of much less time than the public school is taking. And so a lot of it is like bordering on daycare.
Yeah. No, no, totally. And I think a lot of people realize that too, during like the lockdowns, where it's sort of like, uh, what are my kids being taught,
Yeah.
or not taught, and what do I have to unteach them?
Yeah. So that is one of the concerning aspects is like the social values that are being imbued in the public schools because they do border on communism. But otherwise, I'm not I don't think I think you can do better than public schools, but I don't think public schools are destroying kids. I'm actually not. I'm sort of a moderate here. Like I do not think you're going to ruin your kids if you send them to your local public school. I think it will mostly be fine. I think you can potentially do better. I think public schools are inefficient. And again, if I was a better propagandist, I would be telling you the public schools are destroying your children. I don't think that's true. I think they're maybe not completely optimal, but I think they're mostly fine. I obviously came out as an incredibly normal and well-adjusted person, attending a lot of,
Same here,
so
brother. Huh. Well, so you said they were learning how to butcher a pig. That's awesome. My dad's a butcher from Argentina. So while I have three of my brothers work in the family butcher shop, so I don't get my hands dirty very often. But that must be the coolest thing for
So it's
kids that
the funny
age.
thing is, it's actually they have farm day almost every Tuesday, and it's a Tuesday when we're recording this, and it's actually probably their least favorite day.
Oh, it is.
It's not the worst. I'm not trying to act like it's like torture them, but they often don't like farm day, and I'm like constantly lecturing them. I'm like, we literally had this conversation this morning. Like, look, I'm overly stern with this language here, but like for all of human history, 70% of human beings farm. Your ancestors were farmers. Okay. If you don't like farming, you better learn to computer program because otherwise it's like, it's like, this is what we used to do. I
Mhm.
think it's good to understand that. And that's part of why I have them do the farming. They probably won't end up as farmers, although of course I would accept and love them if they do. And there's nothing wrong with being a farmer, but it's good to understand this stuff, that this is how it used to work, that this is like how humans lived for an incredible amount of our history was that most people grew we go even farther back, but for the last 10,000 plus years, it was growing crops and husbanding animals. And this is how our ancestors lived. And I think it's very healthy to have some connection to that, to understand that. It's awesome that part of modern capitalism is instead of needing to butcher pigs, you can tell jokes,
Right.
or invent things or whatever else you can do now. And that's all really cool. But this is how it used to work. This is how we used to live. And I think it's really healthy to have a connection to that. Um, no disrespect to the people there's a lot of people who do it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
So, and no disrespect to them intended by any of those comments.
Yeah. And and with four kids, so I have two. One of the funniest realizations I've had is just they can all grow up in the same household and yet be totally different people.
For sure.
And it's just the reality. And I'm like, I should have realized this when I'm one of five boys and we're different, you know? And I think that you had posted something earlier uh, about your son being pretty adamant about not picking up a carrot on the floor. Do you want to just talk about that
Yeah,
for a
I've been tearing Twitter apart with this story over the last day. Yeah. All right. So uh you know, I I run a household the way that I want my government to work, which is like we're pretty light on rules. My kids get a lot of unstructured time where they're in charge of their lives, but like if we have rules, we enforce them and they're enforced, pretty absolutely. And my 2-year-old, and I don't of course, there's a big difference between 2 and 3. He was probably halfway. I don't remember exactly how old this was because this was several years ago, but he was probably about halfway between 2 and 3, and he threw a carrot on the floor. At which point, you're not allowed to do that. That is a rule. That's you're gonna have to pick up the carrot and put it in the trash. And this was he refused. When generally this was not like me introducing the idea that that you have to throw something away. This is something he had generally understood, and he chose to be very non-compliant, in this instance. And we were very firm that until he picked up the carrot, we would hug him and love him, but like until he picked up the carrot, he wasn't going to be allowed to play with his toys, and he wasn't going to be allowed to do the general things that he's allowed to do. And as soon as he picks up the carrot, he's allowed to go back to playing with his toys and doing all the things that he's generally allowed to do. And if he wants a hug, if he wants to talk to us about it, that's all completely good. But he really does have to pick up the carrot. And his stubbornness was impressive. He resisted picking up the carrot with a nap in between for around 4 hours. And it was the longest he's ever fought us to this day. So I don't wanna portray this as like a sort of regular, experience, but this was, a controversial perspective, when and a lot of people liked it, a lot of it some people found it offensive, and of course, that's how you go viral on Twitter is a lot of people agree with you and a lot of people disagree with you. That's actually tends to be the sweet spot for getting people to pay attention to it. And so, yeah, something like 4 million people have seen this story, in the last couple of days. And, but that's my parenting, that's our parenting, approach. And our kids tend to be we like a healthy amount of disobedience, right? The goal is not to have completely obedient, children, but there are rules. You can't
Mhm.
assault your sibling for no reason. This is gonna be a strongly enforced rule. And similarly, you can't throw trash on the floor. And so we do have our rules and we enforce them.
Yeah, my 2 guys have, very different personalities, and, they're about, like, 19 or 20 months apart, and I have to take that into account when it comes to, discipline, because certain things that would work on my oldest don't work on my youngest, and my youngest is 4, and he's very verbal. The other day, he came out with the word "terrifying," and it's just to see a little kid say the word "terrifying" is something. And, there was one time he has his throws his fits, and he said, something he was so pissed off, he's like, "I want a different family," right? And I said, we'll go outside and find a different family." Um, and then he was like looking at me. I said, "I'll put you outside. You can go find a different family." And he looked at me and he said, "Do it." And he followed it up by saying, "Do it now." And I'm like, I just put myself in the worst corner because I'm not gonna throw my 4-year-old out. Here I was playing along, like, thinking like, "Oh, maybe he's not as serious." And that just completely, I'm like, "I can't deal with this monster the same way."
Yeah,
I gotta find a different way to talk to this dude because he's a tough dude.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes, they're definitely. And honestly, the one of my child that I told the story about is like probably my most willful child to this day. That the one who cried for 4 hours, or well, resisted. He wasn't crying the whole time. Yeah, but who resisted throwing away the carrot for 4 hours. He's probably my most willful of the four. It's a little tough to tell because of the age differences, but plausibly he is. And yeah, I mean, so right, so the lesson there is, well, Ye and well, this is part of what was, debatable, but my opinion is, like, you can't you can't lose. It's like
Right.
'cause you can lose if you're wrong. Like, I've lost to my kids. I'll give you an example of actually losing just to show you that I'm willing to lose. It's like, we had been hesitated with whether our kids should be reading paper books or e-readers. We gave them a Kindle. They really liked the Kindle, but he was, like, exploring books on his own on the Kindle, and I don't know, just out of sort of an aspect of conservatism, I was like, we're just gonna stick to paper books. We'll buy you whatever paper books you want, but we're gonna stick with paper books. Maybe we'll give you a Kindle when you're older." He didn't love this, but he went along with it, And then I was reading a book on my phone and he
Uh,
called me out. He's like, "Dad, why do you make me read paper books when you're reading a book on your phone?" And, I was like, "You're right. That's not consistent behavior." And I've switched back to paper books. I try to not read unless I'm traveling, which is the same time he's allowed his Kindle again. I I'm doing paper books again, and he won that argument. He
yeah.
was I let because I think he made a good point. Um, at 8. But otherwise, I don't. For me, it's like I don't think so. Wait, it's not don't lose. It's not your kids are never right or never have a point. For us, it's you can never win by being histrionic, by crying, by screaming. That will
Mm,
never, ever work. You can win in all kinds of ways. You can change our minds, but if you're attempting to get what you want by crying or screaming, we will not negotiate with terrorists. You
yeah.
can do it for as long as you like, and it will never work. And we've been pretty firm on that, and that's actually worked for us. Like our kids really don't seem to do that to the same degree that a lot of other kids do. And this goes for all four of them. So it's not even, one of them cries last or screams last or whatever. We've been very firm on that, and for us, that's worked.
Yeah, something that we've been dealing with, something that's been interesting. My oldest, he'll be 6 in March, and he is so intrigued by death. Uh, he every single time, like, we listen to, they're into a lot of music that, maybe I shouldn't maybe I shouldn't let them listen to, like, metal and stuff that I grew up listening.
Yeah, that's good. I'm
I
pretty loose.
thank you. Uh, and, we'll be driving and we'll have, like, songs come on, and the first question is that singer alive? Is that singer alive? Every single band, is that singer alive? Is that singer alive? And, I mean, I'm not, worried or anything like that, but, it is something where, uh, I wish I knew exactly what the attraction, or not necessarily attraction, but, why such an interest, because being that I remember being that young and having just, like, nightmares about, like, my parents dying and stuff, and it's really painful. So I hope that I'm helping him approach this from a point where he's not experiencing the pain of the thought of death, but is just sort of, figuring this stuff out.
Yeah, and this is another area where, kids can differ. We started out more restrictive with them, and in terms of media, probably media more than music, but but we started out more restrictive, and then we would be watching even relatively innocent media,
Mm,
and we noticed that our kids would demonstrate this like self-censoring behavior where if it was more often romance than violence, it was something that they found, off-putting and didn't wanna see, and they would either cover their eyes, like, literally without instruction or request, they would cover their own eyes, or they would leave the room when there was a scene that they didn't wanna see. And that actually encouraged us to loosen it up a little bit because they seemed to demonstrate a little bit of an understanding of, like, what they were not ready, to perceive, and we haven't had situations with nightmares. They do sometimes use inappropriate language, but in my view, words are words, and it's mostly about using them appropriately and at the right times. Like, so to me, there's no word that you should never say, and so
mm.
that's not a family perspective. So we're not concerned about them. Like if you're gonna swear, you gotta swear in
Make it
the
count,
right
yeah.
ways, in the right context. Not never to do it. And so that's the approach we've taken with this stuff. Um, and it seemed to have worked out, relatively decently.
Yeah, my kids have let out, the occasional fuck, and it's like, how dare they? I mean, well, it's like, do you listen to yourself, Lou? Do you listen
Yeah,
to what
yeah, yeah.
the fuck comes out of your mouth?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it'd be one thing if, like, mom and dad never swore, but, we did the one of ours I don't think I've sworn on your podcast here 'cause I was actually watching my 10, but one of ours the other day, dropped an egg on the ground, and our 6-year-old, and he's just like, "Oh, fuck." And I was like, That's fair. Like, I can't get mad at you. You know, that's how we've handled it. And, I think because part of it's also I was so as a, somewhat precocious kid, I was so resentful towards adults who wanted to treat me like a child when I felt like I
Mm.
could be treated like more of an adult. And I may have been wrong at times, but I definitely wasn't always wrong. And I've tried to, and by the way, it wasn't mostly my parents, actually. My parents were pretty good about, uh, treating me like an adult when I wanted to be, but it was other adults, it was teachers and other educators or other people. And so I've tried like very hard to not do that and to give them experiences where if they demonstrate that they're, you know, capable, they seem to be emotionally ready, we're going to let them and we're not going to be the force that stops them from doing things even if they're only, 6 or 8 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, a big thing for me is like, yeah, let's talk about it, and I want them to, with all the crazy shit happening in the world, it's like, I want them to feel, more than, comfortable, coming and telling me and mommy what's going on and what they're thinking or if they have, questions. Before I let you go, we mentioned at the beginning, the passing of Scott Adams, and, uh yeah, I think it's a really, obviously a really sad time. I'm sort of, I'm very sad about the passing, but also I look at, just sort of, talk about a guy who's had such a powerful impact, I think, on so many people. And it's nice that he's being, memorialized, or that he has been memorialized as he was dying. A lot of people, he had the opportunity to hear from a lot of people whose lives he really touched.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely, tragic. It makes me feel my own mortality a little bit, although,
Yeah.
there's you know, a difference in age there, but still, it's like it's he's someone who existed in my life for a long time. I read one of his books before I could really understand it because I would read any book in my house, and my grandfather bought one of his books for my dad in like 1996. So I was 12 years old and I read. I think it was called The Dilbert Principle or something like this, and I read his comics, and I wasn't following him my whole life, but I rediscovered him in the last 5-ish years, and he was, very insightful. The 2 movie phenomenon is
Mm.
is something that I, talk about and think about all the time. And he was very brave. He some people you can tell they're sort of chasing celebrity, they're chasing fame. Scott was someone who I think was very smart. He had his own ideas, he had his own thoughts, he put them out there, and he attracted, whoever they resonated with, and he didn't care, and he was willing to bear the consequences. Like if he thought, because few things are as attractive to me as someone who like has something that they think is true and is willing to bear the consequences, to advance that truth. That's something that's been appealing to me since I was a preteen. And Scott had those attributes in spades. Um, and it's sad to see him go. I'm not that truthfully on the scale of sentimentality. I'm probably pretty low,
Mhm.
and this one hit me a little bit, despite having never met the guy or never known him. He was a real positive force in my opinion.
Right on. Well, Jeremy Kauffman, you've been a positive force, in my opinion, and I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. And is there anything you want to plug? Any places people can check you out?
I'm follow me on x.com/Jeremy Kaufman. If you've listened for this long and you found my style of thinking interesting and you don't live in New Hampshire already, you really do need to visit. You don't need to persuade yourself up front that it's the best place or whatever, but come for a visit and check it out and meet some of the people here because there's something special happening in New Hampshire. It's a great place to raise kids. And it merits any sort of liberty inclined person to sort of experience what's happening here firsthand.